Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for standing by and welcome to Visual BI's webinar. Today, we will be talking about emerging BI trends in 2018. During the presentation, all participants will be in listen-only mode. If you have a question during the presentation, please submit it via the Q&A portion of the screen. Simply type your question into the box and click the send button. Our presenter will address questions at the end of the presentation, time permitting. If you don't hear an answer to your question today, don't worry, we will deliver answers to you individually after the webinar. The webinar is being recorded and a link to the replay will be sent to you via email. Presenting today is Chris Holliday, Senior VP of Client Management at Visual BI Solutions. A veteran of delivering challenging projects through seemingly impossible situations, Mr. Holliday is both a leader and a visionary, bringing a unique perspective to serving client needs across the spectrum of the BI and analytics landscape. Chris Holliday joined Visual BI in 2013, directly after being a customer of the firm, and is currently managing all customer relationships and engagements. I will now turn the presentation over to Chris.
Thanks, Darby. Hey, everybody. This is Chris Holliday, as Darby mentioned, Senior Vice President of Client Management. Today, I'm excited to be talking about 2018 BI trends. As we start this presentation, of course, we've got a little bit of legal chit-chat that we have to go through here. And as far as the agenda goes, we're going to give you a brief sort of overview about Visual BI, and then we're going to talk about self-service BI, some trends in data warehousing, advanced analytics, and then other BI trends as well. So I like to take this time to sort of talk about why we're doing this, and I think folks can look around and say, hey, what am I doing in this webinar? Most of our customers have a large investment in SAP, and so we're a BI provider that works across a lot of different platforms, but we do have a focus on SAP. And most of our customers also have a focus on SAP. There's some directive to make improvements or enhancements in their BI, and unless you're the one lucky person, then you've got limited resources, whether that's budget, headcount, or access to your subject matter experts. So in terms of who Visual BI is, we are a company that focuses on consulting services, on software products, on analytic solutions, and on training. We sort of look at ourselves as everything under the BI umbrella, from things like planning and strategic initiatives to support and managed services and everything in between those areas. We have a giant basket of fantastic customers that we are very happy to serve. So our offerings include, different technology stacks, especially on the SAP side, but also across other areas, including, Microsoft, Tableau, Spotfire. Our technology and our products link into the technology through a number of different areas. We've got Visual BI, our VBX extensions, which are add-ons for Design Studio and Lumira Designer. We have a product called VBI View, which is probably the best thing since sliced bread. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. And then we've got another great product called the Value Driver Tree for business modeling. But the services that we offer cover the whole spectrum of BI. So our products, many of you have heard, we've got a bunch of customers for this, VBX extensions. These are add-ons, again, for Lumira Designer. Add a lot of functionality that's missing from the product, enhanced functionality that's there to really make it compete across the product spectrum. The Value Driver Tree is this very sexy business modeling tool. Ask for a demo on this if you're looking at your KPIs and how your different business drivers affect the bottom line. this is a tool that your business can use to visualize it. It really makes a lot of sense. It's so easy to use and really presents a fantastic picture. And then VBI View is that portal tool that we've all been looking for the last, couple of decades, really. If you've got BI artifacts across different platforms, this tool brings them together and displays them all in one place. So if you're a BOBJ customer that has Spotfire and maybe ClickView or Tableau, then you can see all of these BI artifacts in one place. You can search across those artifacts. You're narrowed to only the artifacts that you have access to. So it maintains metadata about each of those artifacts that can be added by both IT and the users. It's just a really fantastic tool for creating this homogenized view of all of your BI work. And we've got a nice quote about that coming up here. So next, we're going to move on to the self-service trends. I'm going to talk about sort of what self-service is and go over the SAP options, and then we can't do anything without talking about cloud now. We'll look at some considerations if you're looking to mix your vendor stack, and then you can see what our recommendations are as well. So in our definition of what self-service is, I think it's important to talk about what it's not and really what your end users want to get out of it. So is it true self-service or is it guided analytics? So somewhere in here, there is self-service that almost all users want. There's very few folks left that want to be just a consumer of a report. Everybody wants to sort or drill or filter. And then depending on who is doing it and what area they're doing this analysis, they may be all of these 5 things from acquisition of data. Hey, I'm going to go out and find my data somewhere, in a HANA view, or I'm going to look online in Wikipedia and start pulling down some data. I'm going to hit my Salesforce account. I'm technically savvy and I can dig into my my AWS S3 instance and start pulling out unstructured data. And then I have to prepare it, and I have to do things like merge this data together. I have to do some data cleanup. I have to create my own hierarchies to make sense out of the information. And then, of course, visualization, which is the part that everybody wants to be good at and very few people really are. But if I'm a subject matter expert, then I may be able to create views of this information that nobody really truly is capable of doing. And as a single user, whether I'm more efficient doing that by myself or not, I think I'm the expert, and so I present a view of this data that I think is relevant to my business. And then I can create views in stories and infographics that help other non-experts understand the information and turn it into wisdom. And then, of course, I can share this out in a lot of different ways and collaborate and get feedback and go through iterative cycles to make the information even more valuable. But the point of this is that most of your users are looking for guided analytics. They want you to do this acquisition and preparation part of it, and then they want to work on the visualization and then possibly hand it off for others to handle this collaborative integration part. And so when we talk about self-service, we're talking across these 2 spectrums, but keeping in mind that there's really 5 important steps there. So from an SAP standpoint, SAP announced a little while ago this year, a few weeks ago, this convergence plan for 2018. So it's pretty clear sort of what their roadmap is, sort of. And so what you're looking at here is essentially a 6-year convergence plan. So you're looking at products that are going to be supported over the next 6 years, but in that time frame, SAP wants to say, we're going to target to move to this stack. Okay, so anything that is dashboard related in terms of Excelsius or Web Application Designer or Design Studio are going to be consolidated to Lumira Designer. And so Lumira Designer remains in effect and continues to improve over the next several years and is supported for 6 years. If it's self-service, Roam BI, Lumira Discovery, Analysis for OLAP, Business Objects Explorer, it's going to get pushed out to Analytics Cloud. So that's the converging choice for those self-service type tools. For dashboarding tools, it stays as Lumira. We only see Lumira here. We think that means just Lumira Discovery, but again, sort of. So for everything else, we're looking at a consistent sort of a plan here. I think that, you know, what's important is Crystal and Webby are going to remain intact for the next 6 years. You know, so all of your investment in this area continues to be of value to your business, and this is quite important here. So look out for this cloud extension policy and plan on tiptoeing into Analytics Cloud. That's our recommendation at this point. So if you're a Lumira Discovery user, the key message here is don't panic. It's somewhat easy to panic from the announcement that SAP made, but if we start to unpack the information that they delivered in that announcement, then we see they're continuing to make improvements in Designer over the next, in Designer over the next few years. Discovery is still supported through 2022 and 2024, depending on what your support level is. And so, you know, Designer continues to be safe for all of its original use cases. You're good there. You do want to make sure that you're getting off of Business Objects Explorer and Excelsius as soon as you can, because those are moving out of support here. So let's talk about cloud. And I think that, you know, everything is driving towards cloud now. It makes sense. It's something that, you know, as we look to fund projects, as businesses look to take on new endeavors, that cloud first is first prize. You know, on-prem is, do we still have to do that? I think has become the norm here. So while there's too big of a current investment in your on-premise installations, whether it's hosted or internally hosted, this hybrid cloud is the current norm. So almost everyone has some kind of cloud. Are you on Salesforce? Are you on some other type of a hosted service? You know, Office 365. Everybody has some form of cloud, and almost everyone still has some form of on-prem compute. So we look at the trend here is your battlefield is going to be, from a BI standpoint, an analytics standpoint, is this sort of high performance data access. You know, the transition from on-prem or multi-cloud into a single reporting layer where your users can get the kind of performance that they continue to press us on, which is everything needs to happen quickly. Decisions have to happen at a conversational pace. Analytics have to follow that at a conversational pace. So people don't want to wait 20 seconds for their drill down to take place. It has to happen in a few seconds. So this, you know, notion of live connections versus, you know, acquire mode for reporting tools is ever more important. And we're going to differentiate this in the next couple of slides here. Individual reporting, if I'm a consumer with a desktop tool and I can hit my own data sources and I can, you know, launch out into online sources and pull that data together where I then just publish the results, that's very, very different than the enterprise reporting where we have to build complex backends in order to support harmonized data, you know, durable data that also performs at the speed that users want. In the front end versus back end decision, you know, the question on governance and security models. So, you know, the sales guys for the front end tools are out there working on the business and saying, you know, use this tool. You don't need IT to support it anymore. You can do all of your own. This is true self-service, right? And I think that's what entices folks into the self-service arena. You know, they don't have to wait anymore, right? So they've got a great idea. It's a game changer. It's, you know, it gives a competitive advantage. They want to act on it immediately and bring that value into the business. but there's things to take into consideration. Should people have access to everything? And certainly the answer is no. And then how do we manage what results get published, where they get published, when they get published, how they get published? These are all the challenges that are in question when you have cloud front ends and you have cloud back ends. All of these things have to be taken into consideration. So there's a lot of complications. What you see is not always what you get. I found that to be a great quote, particularly when you look on a dependency on the native technology stack. So what that means is that my front end from one vendor is not going to work the same way as my front end from my back end vendor. So if I'm an SAP shop and I'm using business objects or I'm using Lumira, then I have access to things that a Tableau does not have access to, or Power BI does not have access to in this case. And so that creates a differentiation in the amount of functionality that's going to be available depending on what the backend looks like. So unfortunately, IT is often not invited until the honeymoon's over. I think we get new tools. They're almost like toys in some ways. We get to play with them for a while, and and they energize us and they help us to get passionate about the things that we're doing. And this is great until it gets really, really hard. And then we need people to come in I lost it there, come in and sort out the problems that are going to come up. So we end up in this kind of hybrid BI scenario where the users are bringing their own BI to the party. And while this is the norm, and it's going to continue to be the norm, different folks are trained on different tools and have different needs. The age-old question of what is the BI team's responsibility? What is the COE's responsibility here? Is it to be a steward, or is it to dictate what needs to happen? And there's no wrong answer there. It depends on how the business is built and what the culture is like. But ultimately, we think you're going to be in an environment where you have multiple tools, and that is going to drive a requirement for things like VBI View, which we talked about earlier, and SAP's Analytics Hub. And so we have this quote up at the top here that by 2020, organizations that offer users access to a curated catalog of internal and external data will derive twice as much business value from their analytics investment. So this is key. Get your users access to the information that you've put so much work into. The delivery of the subject area, delivery of the analytics, delivery of the reporting is just the beginning. It's the management of that delivery after it's in place that makes all the difference. It's the getting it out there, making sure folks know where it is, what it is, and when I've got different portals to go to get that information, users get confused, and it becomes disconcerting to have to go and chase data all over my business. So a consolidated and homogenized hub is something that our world has needed for so long. Visual BI has now brought that to you with VBI View. SAP has a version that's more SAP specific in Analytics Hub. Now, one thing to keep in mind here, and this trend has already started, that tool jumping is very easy. So it's easy to implement a tool that's in the cloud. It's also easy to stop using that tool and use a different tool. And so the barriers in the past where we had to go out and fund a project for $200,000 to $500,000 in order to buy the hardware and implement my dev environment, my test environment, my sandbox. I had to have a disaster recovery area. There's a lot of money to go out and build all this stuff, and now that barrier is gone. I just create a subscription, and for between $5 and $200 per seat per month, now I have access to all this great analytic power. And if I don't like it, then I can just change. And I think that's going to create its own cycle that we as BI professionals will have to learn to manage a little bit. Companies will have to put some governance propositions into place in order to manage that internally. Otherwise, sometimes if it's too easy to jump, then we don't really get the kind of buy-in that we need from that, investing more effort into making things useful. So as we look at a couple of different scenarios in the kind of in the cloud space for individual, we're going to look at an individual and an enterprise use case here. So we're just taking Power BI as an example here, where there's Power BI, like many tools, like most of the tools, has a lot of different connectivity options. So I can connect to to an Oracle backend, obviously any Microsoft backend. I can connect to HANA or BW. I can connect to APIs and all sorts of different things out there, dozens and dozens of different connectors. And so as a user sitting at my desk with Power BI Desktop, I can go and hit any data source that I have access to and create the queries and do some modeling on my own system, and spend as much time or as little time putting together visualizations that I think will be useful to my group or my org or my enterprise. And very easily I can publish those up, and if I have data gateway set up, then the data that I'm accessing can be pulled into in some form into this Power BI service, and lots of different tools have a similar paradigm. And so what this does is it means that a single user, I've done everything, right? I've cultivated this field of data. I've merged it myself and munged it, and I've tooled around with it until I've got it exactly the way I want it. I don't really care so much about live connectivity because I created this thing that I can then publish to my, in its final form, I can publish it up to the service, and then other users can look at it. It may not be an analytics application, but it may be the product of the analytics that I've done as an individual. Now, for good or bad, I own the process that happened, that went into that. So if I used my Salesforce login and I pulled data into this thing, all of that is now mine. And so it was easy for me to do it. If I spent 12 hours working on it, great. If I'm happy with the outcome, great. And we see this a lot. This is the use case that we see over and over again. And it gives users confidence that they can do almost anything they want with data that they have access to. The problem, of course, is when other people want to use this data that is queried through whatever process me as a non-trained BI resource went through in order to get this together. So then we come up with the enterprise model here. And so the biggest difference is that the BI team has now created this abstraction layer in analysis services. So all of my source data got pulled in through a long process, and that one arrow right there actually represents a large process in order to extract data from someplace, load it into my, let's say, my Azure environment in this case, and then transform it into usable analytics in this Azure analysis services, where then Power BI connects to it. And then everybody who consumes that report can also do their own analysis on it. So it takes more work from IT. It's hardened, it's harmonized, and it's integrated, and this is what the users want. So those are the two use cases, and why we really have to manage expectations on what self-service actually represents. So we'd be remiss to go through this without talking about, if your backend is BW, and many of yours is, in a lot of cases you're going to deal with this. We have this one connector here that SAP owns and does not license out to other companies called BIX. And what BIX gives you is the ability to use all of the security and hierarchies and navigational attributes and user exit variables inside of BW that other reporting tools using the OLADB for OLAP or whatever other connector they're using into this BW data don't have access to those things. And so what you get is not necessarily what you see if you're a BW consumer. And so regardless of what the front end tool is, this is from Microsoft's documentation here, regardless of what the front end tool is, if it's not from the SAP side, it's going to have a different view of BW, which drives us toward sort of this HANA view notion, which we're going to talk about in a little bit on the data warehousing side. So when we talk about kind of, what our recommendation is that there are drivers from having a single stack from the bottom up that give you advantages, certainly in some areas. And, there's disadvantages and advantages, and I think it's up to the enterprise, and we can help you wade through those decisions here. So looking at Gartner's Analytics and BI Magic Quadrant here, not a lot of change up in this top quadrant here, but what we do want to say here is we asterisk this with the fact that when they evaluate SAP in this context, they're looking at only Lumira Discovery and Analytics Cloud are the only two tools that they're using for this evaluation, so they don't factor in BOBJ at all here. So you're looking at BOBJ or Lumira Designer for that matter. So, just a little bit of movement here in the visionary, this lower right quadrant here. Sorry, I had a little mishap there. With a few companies dropping out of this quadrant and a few others moving up. ThoughtSpot and Sisense have moved up. I think that what this tells us is that you're continuing to see sort of the same value from a lot of the companies over the last couple of years, but this probably goes towards the disrupted nature of our business. And I'll wrap that up towards the end of this presentation, but you're seeing strong value from all of the companies in this right side over here. So what are our recommendations here? As with almost all things, really manage expectations and understand what the expectations are from your user community when it comes to self-service versus guided analytics. Self-service is still the hot buzzword in this area, and it will continue to be that way because it feels empowering, and it is. But oftentimes when users say self-service, that what they really mean is guided analytics. So our recommendation is, if you can pull it off, have all your analytics on one platform. So it's gonna increase your time to, it's gonna decrease your time to market, which is the good thing. And it's going to decrease your support effort, which is also a good thing. Hybrid is fine. You've got an on-premise investment that it probably doesn't make sense to move wholesale to the cloud right now, but some things are certainly best for the cloud right now. And so this hybrid BI is something that you should embrace. Embedded analytics, we're going to talk about that more in the next section here with data warehousing. Depending on what the application it is, look at embedded analytics as a friend, not as an enemy, but evaluate it based on what the application is. And so, we kind of talked about these two options with, what it means back in this, in the enterprise reporting area here, that if you're, depending on what your back end is, if you're having trouble with that native back end with your front end tools, you may need to re-architect at some point in order to get the value that you want. And then, multiple tools to address all the needs. You're going to need a unified portal for that, something like VBI View. That wraps up self-service. So in the data warehousing trends, we've got, of course, our SAP options. We're going to talk about data lakes because, that's the trend. And then we're also going to delve into data provisioning. So from an SAP option standpoint, BW 7.5 on HANA and B4H are obviously the trends here. So we're going to talk about data warehousing. We're talking about data warehousing services and the application chunks that you need in order to make a data warehouse. This is not exclusively a data lake. It's not a data store. It's not a data mart. This is a full-on data warehouse. This is how your enterprise is going to consume harmonized and fast data into valuable information here. So the trend right now, still folks are moving to 7.5 first. I think the notion of B4H is still a little bit scary. There's existing investments that make it difficult to push all the way to B4H. If we look at re-implementations and established customers, it's tough to get to B4H in one push. So customers are going with 7.5 first, and they're preparing for a 2018-2019 migration to B4H. We feel like the tool is matured, and certainly in this time frame, the 2018-2019, we should see quite a few migrations in that area. So, in Greenfield, it's a different story. You've got an immediate push right into B4H makes sense because you don't have a lot of existing artifacts that are going to need to get converted. So that's definitely something. Embedded BW on S4. So if you're moving into S4, and eventually you all will, this BW 7.x 4 or 5 is already included in an embedded fashion inside of that application. So the big hurdle there is kind of it ties your upgrades of your ERP and BI together. It's all one thing, right? So you're running BI on your transactional system. Depending on the industry, depending on your business model and your culture, this may make sense. In the past, we've looked at this and had an almost nauseous reaction to this, but I think we look at this now in a way that it's viable. The horsepower is there. The hurdles to this are not what they used to be. We used to have, these sort of distributed systems that were very fragile, and a lot of that's been overcome by just better development practices and more testing up front before patches come out. And so it makes more sense to look at analytics on your transactional system. It gives us a barometer for evaluating real-time versus batch in terms of what we're doing with BW. But customers are definitely looking hard at this option right now. Some customers are implementing this option and having good results, so it's worth a look. So from a HANA Enterprise standpoint, SAP Cloud Platform versus this kind of on-prem deployment of HANA Sidecar, you're going to see less and less of these. They're out there already, they're deployed. Many of you have them, but SAP Cloud Platform makes this very easy. It becomes something that, cloud is going to win for this type of stuff. There's no question about it. It's just, as a business, what's your inflection point? Are you going to drive towards, pushing it now, or are you going to wait a little bit longer to try to get more value out of your existing deployments? So when we talked before about the challenges of accessing, BW data from non-SAP tools, then we get into this notion of what S4 provides, and BW 7.5 for that matter, just in a different way. So B4 HANA provides you an automated HANA view generation process, which gives you really easy SQL access to these other tools. You can do a similar thing in a less automated fashion with BW 7, early 7.3 and up. It gets easier with 7.5, and the development paradigm shifts a little bit as well. But you get a much easier sort of layer for reporting from a number of these different tools. So that's what we're trying to convey with this slide here. So let's talk about data lakes. Data lakes are now pretty much, almost everywhere. I think everybody realizes the value of the data lake, but the definitions, they vary, right? So it could be just general purpose storage that gives you a place to put your structured and your unstructured data. It could be this technology and best practices and processes with heavy governance and design constraints that give you a enterprise data store that is, fully or partially modeled. And then it could be anything between those two things. And that is a data lake. Over time, this probably replaces the data warehouse, or the data warehouse just becomes a part of this. But ultimately, I think down the line, even, within the next 5 years, we see these two things become synonymous. And the notion of the data warehouse as this kind of atomic, only structured data store is going to change. So definitely cloud first on the data lake. It's a difficult proposition, I think, to go out and say, I need to fund hardware or, to to have our own sort of elastic, scalable internal data lake structure where I can put data of unknown origins and unknown size at this time. These are really difficult propositions to make and to try to get funded right now with all of the cloud options that are out there. And every Google search you do, and every time you're in Facebook or LinkedIn, you see cloud, 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 cloud everywhere. I think it's legitimate to say that, you know, cloud first for sure. AWS and Microsoft Azure are way out in front of the pack on this in terms of, you know, having storage and the services around that storage in order to make it useful. We're looking at a little shift here on the acquisition side. So it's extract, load, and transform now. You know, we get all the data, right? You don't. Before we were worried about storage because storage was costly. We were worried about bandwidth because bandwidth was costly, and both those things have come down quite a bit. So, you know, extract it, load it, then worry about transformation. This is a paradigm that works. It works very well. It's being shifted over. It doesn't mean that you have to undo anything that you've done before, but as you consider new development and you consider, you know, new architecture, you're going to look at get all the data. So then all this heavier processing gets moved to where you have heavier compute available to you. You can do standard transformations, or you can do more advanced stuff, you know, machine learning, incorporating AI into your transformations to get even more value out of your data. So in the data lake space, you've got single cloud data. So all of your data is in one cloud. All of it's maybe in a single platform even. It could be in a single cloud and multiple platforms. And it can also be multiple clouds. So maybe you've got some of your data in S3 in AWS and some of it's in Azure Data Lake. This is less of a problem than it was a few years ago. Certainly, almost everyone is still going to be in some form of a hybrid scenario where I've got data on-prem, I've got data in maybe, you know, one cloud, and I need to combine those things together and call that my data lake. All of that stuff is okay right now. I think as you move into, you know, this longer term strategy of what your technology and your practices look like, this, you know, again, bandwidth is cheap and storage is cheap, and so those things are facilitating some options on your architecture. So our recommendation, same recommendation we've had on this, is do something, and anything is better than nothing right now. There are literally no barriers to your entry into this space. General purpose storage for structured and unstructured data at a minimum. From a provisioning standpoint, again, this is principally for, you know, SAP shops. If BW is your target, then BODS, still Business Objects Data Services, is still your answer here. It gives you the most flexibility. You know, you've got a strong user community out there for BODS. You know, the resources are there to do the work. You've probably already got it. If your target is HANA Enterprise or it's SAP Cloud Platform, then you've got to make a decision between SDI and SLT. The trend is certainly towards SDI. There's some maturing that still needs to happen, I think, depending on your source platform and database. You know, SAP to SAP is pretty easy, just SDI. There's no question about it. Depending on, you know, what other sources you might be coming from, you need to do some investigation, and we can help you with this in terms of what connectors are working well with SDI and maybe what would be more suitable for SLT or even BODS. So this, you know, API for middleware. So you've got, you know, all the traditional Informatica and others that in this middleware space for data integration. You know, we're starting to look at this, you know, Apogee and MuleSoft, or MuleSoft is now Salesforce as of yesterday. So you know, these are starting to be looked at a little bit more also for reporting, and some interesting attempts are being made at how to get the most value out of your middleware. And so, you know, look for that to start to shift. We're seeing the shift starting to take place now, where middleware is not just middleware for integration, it also gets more involved on the BI side. AWS and Azure have fantastic offerings as well. You know, these other tools, Apogee and MuleSoft, are very specialized in what they do. You know, again, these cloud offerings on a single stack, you've got you know, your users and your developers can really take advantage of what these cloud platforms have to offer. So now we're going to move into advanced analytics, you know, big data, predictive, you know, AI, all the things that go into this. So predictive, you know, for the last 5 years, it was called predictive, you know, predictive analytics. And now we've got all the new synonyms. So we've got AI, and I think AI is the one that people have taken on because it's easy to say. You know, of course, machine learning is a component of it, but some people refer to it strictly as machine learning. There's neural nets. There's other names that are going to be used as well. When we look at what's trending right now, so I think everyone is trying still to get as much value in this space as they can, but the use cases are hard to come by because predictive is as much about a process and a mindset as it is about, you know, just sort of getting the result. And so we're starting to understand that it's not just the result as much as it is the process of let's answer a question that creates 10 new questions or 100 new questions. And it's a process of discovery that we commit to as opposed to a single deliverable. Now, there are great use cases in this space, you know, fraud detection and, you know, recommendation engines. All of these things are well known and are solid use cases. And I think once we start to get outside of the 3 or 4 really well-known use cases, then we get into this really hard work kind of it's going to be a process to get to a point where you're going to get value all along the stream. But if you're trying to count on a single deliverable at the end of this, then you know, maybe that's a little bit too much at this point. So the tools provide support. They provide great support. You've got, you know, everything's got NLP in it now. You've got smart insights in SAP Analytics Cloud. You've got quick insights in Power BI. Every tool now has its own sort of guided machine learning that's given users value without even knowing that it's AI or predictive behind the scenes. SAP's Analytics Cloud, you know, the full suite of predictive functionality is still evolving. AWS and Microsoft, you know, from a platform standpoint, they still dominate. And so if you're data laking in AWS or Microsoft, then you've got a lot of different tools that are available there. We can help you wade through some of those as well. There's decisions that need to be made, and you know, you need to have the resources lined up for this. And that's what we talk about when we talk about process and mindset. So it's a combination of having your SMEs who are tuned into what that mindset needs to be, along with resources who can capture the value from a technical standpoint. On the IoT side, we're talking full bloom in the hype cycle right now. Everybody's going ballistic with IoT, and for good reason. So this, you know, IEC is looking at 95% of all data being generated in real time by IoT devices by 2025. And the last statistics I saw on this were that we're looking at a 10-fold increase in the size of the data sphere by 2025. So if we're at 16 exabytes, right, you know, in 2016, then we're looking at 160 exabytes by 2025. You know, it could be even bigger than that, and I mean that's gazillions of zeros to get to these number of bytes. It's almost incomprehensible, I think, in the way that we process data right now, of how companies are going to take advantage of all of that information. Certainly, there are many software providers out there and app developers who are working to make sure that we have tools to take advantage of this information. As a service provider, Visual BI, we are certainly investing in all of the you know, the processes to look at and make sure that our customers have an avenue to tap into this. As the connectivity and the platform choices narrow, these opportunities are just going to unfold. And the use cases are there, but there's still a lot of connectivity questions, and and all the standard sort of BI challenges remain, right? Data governance. How do I make these? Is it durable? Can I repeat it? If I can repeat it, is it valuable? So if I'm tapping stream analytics here, I've got real-time data that's coming in. I'm making decisions off of this. Is the same process for making the decision now going to be valid 2 hours from now? And this is a legitimate question and one that needs to be taken into consideration. So in the IoT plus data lake, that's where it's all going to live, right? IoT connecting to your data lake, you're going to dump all that data in there, extract it. It's going to come naturally from your devices, and you're going to load it into your data lake, and then you're going to process it in some way. So a lot of activity is going to happen there. Similar resources or the same resources that we use for data warehousing for BI are going to transform their skill set into this area. It's already happening. Some of you are on the call now. So these billions of devices, as of right now, we have very few published success stories for analytics and IoT. Some of that's because of the competitive advantages that are already being reaped, and some of it's because these success stories are still hard to come by for the reasons that we've talked about before. Connectivity and platforms still need to get sorted out. So the state of big data, I think we've air quoted big data here in the same way that we've quoted predictive. That really the hype has shifted off of the terminology big data, and it's shifted into more of an understanding and kind of a slow adoption, I'll say. What we're looking at is certainly distributed and elastic storage has tremendous value. Not having to fork out big capital dollars to create a exadata size data warehouse has created opportunities that that weren't there even 5 years ago. So we talked about it before in data warehousing. This elastic storage, distributed storage, this has tremendous value. Distributed compute also has tremendous value where we can do the work to get the value out of it. It's not hard, they're making it easier every day. The platforms are. However, the use case and the value prop, I think, is it's still harder to come by. And as we evolve in the mindset within the culture at our companies, then these value props are going to become more evident. I don't think right now, and our customers aren't seeing necessarily a gap in the tool set, because it's simply a question of focusing our users, our companies into this mindset of extracting more value from this information. And then, I alluded to it before, but streaming takes even more work. You've got almost all the same complexities as you have in simply processing distributed compute. You're using the same resources, but now I've added this real time. So I've got real-time problems with data quality. I've got real-time problems with consistency. I've got real-time problems with understanding the analytics that are coming off of and making adjustments in real time to those analytics. And governance, and again, sort of all of this stuff that's hard about any type of information management is, just as hard or even harder with big data. Getting governance policies in place, and again, we can help you with this as we've worked on this with many of our customers. So what's our recommendation is we said it last year, get your data lake in place here. You got to have something. If you don't have a data lake at this point or a plan to implement one this year, then you are falling behind, and this is going to hurt your company down the line, because this data is falling through the colander. It's falling through the holes in the sieve. You're losing data every day that you're not saving it. Narrow your tooling to a specific platform offerings if you can. So if you're going to use Azure as a data lake, if you're going to use AWS as a data lake, you're probably going to get more value out of focusing on the tools that those companies have. Now, if you can do this strictly using maybe Apache tools and roll your own. You can certainly do it on a straight SAP stack. You've got options here. Look at those options in each of the platforms. The analytics culture, driving that, I just talked about it. It almost doesn't need to be said, but that is the job of the folks who are on this call, is to drive the analytics culture at the companies that we work with. Make sure that you're showing processes and you're demonstrating wins, that the processes can be repeatable, not necessarily the technicalities of those, but get the wins, help them to ask more questions. And then from an IoT standpoint, lay the foundation out there. The business is curious about it because they read about it, they see it, it's everywhere, it's coming at us 24/7. The curiosity is peaked. Capitalize on that curiosity to get some kind of a strategy in place and start to implement some proof of concepts there. So the last thing I want to talk about is not directly related to analytics yet. I mean, like many things that are driving on the sort of on the trending technology side. Distributed ledger technology, blockchain. We've got this whole new platform for thought and application design. I think the gigantic increase in market cap of the sum of cryptocurrencies has had a big has been a driver for pushing awareness on Bitcoin and other DLTs in other blockchains. But there's a heck of a lot of really interesting opportunities out there that have nothing to do with Bitcoin, and in fact have nothing to do with blockchain necessarily. And so there's been some great advancement on Ethereum and smart contracts that live on Ethereum. And so if you don't know what a smart contract is, it's sort of this thing that's guaranteed to happen when something else happens. And so there's a platform for writing effectively, coded contracts that, whatever the driver is to make that contract be fulfilled, it is guaranteed to execute because it's distributed in a DLT, and nobody can stop that thing from happening. So it opens up the door for all kinds of interesting things. One that you may not have heard about, IOTA, and this Tangle. The Tangle is a distributed cyclic graph. It's a DLT, but it's different. It's not blocks like a blockchain is. And it also has no transaction fees, and it doesn't have the transaction constraints of scalability that blockchain has. It's set up, IoT's in the name, as the machine-to-machine interchange, so that your self-driving car can drive itself up to a charging station and negotiate, whatever that looks like, the charging station, and pay by the kilowatt for a charge, so that your self-driving car can keep driving itself around and pick up your groceries, or if your groceries don't materialize themselves in your refrigerator. Other great, a lot of people working on these health information interchanges through using different DLTs as well. The use case is certainly there. The technology in this case, I think, still has to catch up a little bit. But from a BI standpoint, we're looking at an indirect impact. I don't think we're going to host our platforms out in any kind of a DLT, but we will get a lot of information from those DLTs, because they generate a lot of information, and there's just millions and billions of transactions that take place. It's a very exciting space to keep an eye on, and over the next 5 years, outside of the currency, I think we're going to start to see mainstream adoption. Many of the service providing companies are out there working on solutions in this. At Visual BI, we're also working on solutions. So, one of the things that I encourage folks to check out here is IOTA's Data Hub. It's a data marketplace where sensors are connected into the hub, and this is in proof of concept mode, so you can't actually physically transact with this, but you can sort of virtually transact with this, where you can purchase sensor data that's coming off of sensors dotted all over the globe. But it starts to empower data owners, and there's the notion that as an individual, I have data that my age and my weight and my heart rate and my current location is worth some fraction of a US cent. And over time, and you increase the number of people, and that information has a tremendous amount of value. We as companies are out there buying that information right now, but we're buying it from sort of this federators of this information. We're not buying it from the individual. And these data marketplaces over the next decade, let's say, will become the source for that type of information, with me participating democratically in the distribution of that data. So then I, as a person, own that information and can contribute and also reap the benefits of it, even whether it's a slow trickle or not. So, you've got this micro data market, with no transaction fees. Then you can transact at a microscopic level as opposed to other DLTs, which do have transaction fees. They have different use cases, but all very interesting. So I think that wraps up the presentation point and what we see as the trends for 2018. We're going to open up to questions. I'm not going to take all the questions because I don't have a lot of time. It looks like I've got about 4.5 minutes. As we go through the Q&A here, I'd also like to let you know that we've got some events coming up here. So more webinars in April, adapting to SAP Analytics Cloud for hybrid data discovery. Varun's he's a great presenter. That's in early April. And then later on in April, Arun V has a B4H presentation to do, which I'm sure will be very informative. So I'm looking at questions now. I'm not sure if you can see these or not, but the first question is, can Power BI reports be deployed in VBI View? And so the VBI View is let's call it an aggregator of reports as opposed to a development environment. So yes, Power BI reports can be and will be displayed in VBI View, and then you can access those reports and, of course, always jump back into the portal, into app.powerbi. But you will see the reports, you'll see the metadata of the report, you can run the report, and so I hope that answers your question. The next question is, will we share the recorded session for this? Of course we will. The recorded movie will be shared as well as the deck. And while I'm talking about some more things, in Dallas, if you're in Dallas or anywhere in Texas for that matter, and you need Lumira training, right here coming up between March 27th and March 30th, we've got discovery and designer training for Lumira. There's still some spots open for that. You can see where you can reach this on our website here. Next question is there a document which lists pros and cons for the major BI tools? And so we do have a document that lists those things out. We've done a number of presentations on this, from a front end standpoint, and that's specifically what this user is asking. They're asking about SAP Click, Tableau, and Power BI. We do have those compared in a presentation, which we can share with you after this presentation is over. And then it looks like we're coming up to the end of the presentation here, so I'm going to go ahead and shut this down. I want to thank everybody for coming, and we hope to see you on the next one. Thanks, everybody.